It's 5 to 7. He looked to the heavens when he heard the engines hum. A sky full of planes and each one with a bomb. And they're gonna drop them on someone. It's 5 to 7.
Well, hello. Thank you for joining me. I'm Keith Bengelli. This is Islands at War. Not our usual podcast. This is another podcast that features a book or series of books. And I'm very pleased to welcome locally based author Theresa Flem. Hello, Theresa. Thank you for coming in.
Keith, thank you for inviting me.
No problem at all. Now, Theresa, primarily and centrally, we're going to talk about the book that you have written about the occupation. But this is not your first novel at all, is it?
No, it isn't, Keith. This is my fifth novel. All my previous novels were either set in Cornwall, and the first one was set in Kent during the miners' strike, 1983-84.
Okay, and they're all available, aren't they?
They're all available. They're all available on Amazon, and some of them are still in Kelvin's writer's block in the arcade. That's for people locally. Yeah.
They could, yes, they're all in stock. Writer's block. In St. Peter Port. Now, the occupation-based novel is called A Sea of Barbed Wire. And what sort of drew you after 5 novels about writing about Guernsey?
Well, once I started coming to Guernsey, and we moved here about nearly 5 years ago, I was just captivated by the history because I didn't know about that the Germans occupied Guernsey. I had no idea. It was all something distant, and then when you see all the history around the island, the landscape on the coast, the bunkers and everything, there's just so much to explore. And then you start thinking, what was it like to be here at the time? And when the Germans came, it must have been so strange and frightening. And then, being a writer, I started imagining what it would be like to actually experience the rationing, the starvation, the threats, the curfew. There was so much oppression, actually. And then a story started formulating in my mind about the prisoners of war who were working under the Germans on Guernsey to build these bunkers. And I started to imagine what it would be like if a prisoner escaped and a family took him in. And that's how the story began.
That we'll get into that without obviously giving any plot reveals away. Yeah. But I'm interested in this sort of awakening because I take it, although your surname is Flem, you weren't born here yourself.
No, I wasn't. I was born in London, and when I met Graham, probably about 25 years ago, I didn't really know where the Channel Islands were.
Well, that goes for a lot of people, possibly even some listening to this podcast. Okay, so you started to form these impressions and that. Can you just tell me a little about how you approached the research? For example, did you go to, well, I imagine you did go to written sources, but I'd like you to tell me and listeners about that, but also whether you spoke to anybody that had experienced the occupation. Can you just talk us through the research that you did and how you went about it?
Yes, I suppose the first impression I got was when we went to the German Occupation Museum, which is literally like stepping back into the past with all the old dusty things. It's very atmospheric in there. And spoke to Richard Hume, and I think there is so much really, but there are books. I'm always collecting books. I've got hundreds of books. Second-hand books, and then I went to the Priaulx Library, the Guillolet Library, and eventually the Island Archives, which is a huge resource. And I've spoken to people, spoken to Molly B.A. and June Money. I visited June Money several times, and she told me about how she enjoyed it really as a child, as a young child, and how the Germans were nice to her and kind to her and looked after her in a way. When they heard an air raid coming over, they'd go and grab her and take her to safety and things.
And so, having sort of gone through your research, presumably then the characters start to form in your mind? So do the characters form and then you fit the plot to the characters, or how does the plot start to evolve? Does it evolve and you slot characters in? How do you sort of go about this?
I think the characters sort of slot themselves in, really.
Yeah, yeah.
It all started actually with the Polish prisoner who had escaped, and his name was Lucas. And it all started, I started to hear his voice in my head. And it's all character-led. The whole story was character-led, really. The Ellen and her parents, and then her nan, Joan, who had the farmhouse, they all gradually sort of emerged. It's like...
Yeah. But the novel itself starts... The war has already started.
Yes.
Once the novel...
It started in 1942.
Yes.
My book, A Sea of Barbed Wire, starts in 1942. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's important, I think, for listeners to know. So that the occupation starts in 1940.
Yes.
So we're a little way into 1940, and you're right that the organisation Todd workers are here and the slave workers are here also. And so the main characters in the novel, you mentioned Lucas, who's a young Polish. You got him as a Polish prisoner of war. So is he a prisoner?
Yes.
Is he a slave labour?
Well, he was captured in Poland, and he was eventually brought to Guernsey. I suppose there's not a lot of difference. The organisation Todd people were treated a bit better. But,
A little better, yeah.
Yeah, but Lucas certainly wasn't treated very well at all. So he didn't volunteer to work for organisation Todd. Although later on, the organisation actually did go out and actually pick people up to do the and the slave workers, the prisoners. They all had a pretty rough time and were fed on virtually nothing, cabbage soup and a bit of dry bread if they were lucky.
Yes, and of course, 1942 was when the bunker building was really at its height, following the Hitler directive, especially of October 1941. But I'm interested as well in the development of the Guernsey-based characters that we've got here. Very, very at pains not to reveal plot, but we've got Ellen, which is my grandmother's name, who was here in the war. Ellen Delamere, who is true to say that she's the main character of the book.
She's the main character. Yes.
Could you give us a little sort of flavour about some background on Ellen?
Yes, Ellen is when the book opened, she's about 19, and she's feeling quite, I suppose, trapped by the Germans, the fact that she can't do things, go out when she wants to. She's feeling that she ought to be rebelling and that people ought to be rebelling, but she doesn't know what to do. So I suppose as a teenager she would have felt like rebelling, actually. She works at a bakery, a local bakery, and she works with Lucy, who's her best friend, who's quite a character. Quite a fun-loving. Lucy is quite a fun-loving character. And I'm quite fond of Lucy in the book.
So I've got, I've read the book and just looking back at my notes, because we have discussed this at a live event earlier in the year. So Ellen's friend, and Lucy is married, isn't she? And she's got a little backstory as well. Could you just reveal a little bit of Lucy's sort of backstory?
Yes, Lucy. Lucy has got a little boy, and she's married to Peter with a little boy, but Peter went off to fight in the war and left her, and she likes enjoying life, and she quite fancies some of the German soldiers who are walking around.
And she's quite open about this.
Yes, she's quite open about it, and she's quite flirtatious. She's sort of blonde and sort of flirty, but she's got this little boy at home, and actually life isn't very easy for her because she hasn't got much money. She's stuck at home in the blackout and the curfew with the little boy, and I don't know whether I ought to reveal too much of the story or what happens to her.
We've got two very close friends here of a similar age.
Yes,
but really that they're friends because they both work for the pharmacist. Is that right?
No, they
work at the bakery.
Yep. Ellen's father is a pharmacist.
Yeah, we'll get on to Ellen's father. Yeah, sorry, that was my mistake. So Ellen and Lucy both work together, but they are quite different. Lucy presumably is a little younger. Ellen is a little younger than Lucy, and so you've got this divergence of characters here. But they rub along together well, don't they?
I would say that Ellen is more mature, although she's She's younger. She's more of a mature, independent sort of person than Lucy.
Oh, okay, that's interesting, yeah. And as we say, Lucy's family, basically, is it just her and Peter? Because, her and Charlie, her little boy, because Peter is away.
Yeah.
Has she got any other families?
No, she hasn't, but she's got her mother-in-law who lives locally.
Right, okay, yeah.
Who she doesn't get on with very well.
Well, I think that was a template that was quite universal
Yes.
Throughout the Channel Islands during the occupation. But Ellen has got a stable family unit, hasn't she?
Yes.
So you tell a little bit about background of her family unit? Because her father's an interesting character, isn't he?
Ellen's father.
Yes.
Yes, Ellen's father, Albert, is an interesting character. He's a pharmacist, and he's finding it difficult getting supplies for his patients or the people who come with prescriptions. And of course, it's not his fault if he can't dispense the tablets. But it's very wearing on him because, if he can't get hold of insulin, for instance, then it's devastating. So yes, and he's against what Ellen wanted to do when Ellen decided that they really ought to take Lucas in and hide him. Albert is very dead against it, actually. He knows how dangerous it is, that they could be arrested, charged, and deported or even shot for hiding prisoners. So he's quite a level-headed character. Whereas Meg, his wife, Ellen's mother, is more perhaps on Ellen's side, but she's a bit of a more gentle character, a bit more sympathetic. Whereas Meg's mother, Joan, the nan, Joan is quite a nice character. I like her because she's quite forthright and doesn't like messing about.
Yeah. So you've got quite a sort of well fleshed out characterisation of the whole of the family.
But they're very real to me. Like I know them.
Well, it's interesting as well. You talk about if you did a sort of deep dive into Albert Delamere's life as a pharmacist. My friend, who I mentioned, is coming for a Christmas lunch with me tomorrow. Yeah. He's in his 80s now, and he was born during the Second World War here, and his father was the pharmacist at Boots here.
Oh, yes.
And John tells me that his father was full of angst because he was running out of drugs to be able to help people. And he started to delve into what you would call foraging, looking for plants.
Oh, did he? Yeah.
And having to come up with ersatz medicines. And he, without doubt, kept many people alive by having to apply himself in that way. And so when I read the book, although I never met John's father, it certainly resonated with me.
Yeah.
And there are only so many pharmacists here in the war, but the way that you flesh the characters out, they are very, from my memories of what my grandparents told me, they are very representational of how ordinary people struggled in the war. And of course, not everybody had a Polish prisoner of war within the bosom of the family. No. So when you sort of concocted Lucas's character, what are you able to sort of give us an idea of his backstory in Poland, or is there a sort of a deep character within Lucas in the book?
I'd rather not give too much away about his background character, but he was a farmer. He was working with his father on the farm. His English isn't very good. He's got a sister in Poland who is a teacher, but I don't really want to go into that too much. No. But and he's a very good-looking young man, but he's much the worse for wear when he turns up on the doorstep. And he's been badly beaten up. So that's why Ellen feels very sorry for him. And he's on the point of collapse, and he mistakes Ellen for his sister and begs Ellen to help him when he comes to the door. And I think because he says, "Irene, you must help me," then he's touched her heart, really.
Yeah. And how much sort of research did you do about slave workers and organisation-type workers here?
I did quite a bit. It makes them quite horrendous reading some of it.
Yeah.
And I I consulted Dr. Gillian Carr quite a lot. She helped me with the sort of background story of the prisoners and the camps, German prison camps, and how some people were deported and sent to bivouac in Germany.
Yes.
And she was a huge source of inspiration for me and help. She's very encouraging.
Yes, well, this is Professor Ginny Carr, who's a renowned academic specialising in occupation studies. I've met her a couple of times. And my own grandmother got in trouble with the Germans on at least 2 occasions for throwing food to the slave workers when they were driven through the streets. Yeah, I mean, they really were driven through the streets in rags with overseers with whips. I mean, it was really very difficult to emphasise just how the brutality, because obviously there was no photographs taken. No. And my grandmother, as I say, a couple of times did get into quite a bit of trouble. Okay, so it's very difficult to talk too deeply about the book because obviously there's twists and turns and things. And you're happy that the book followed, if I can put it, the sort of contours of the war. Does it sort of react? Is it, we have a family situation with a family with Lucas sort of embedded within it. Do you refer to the outer effects, or rather the outer goings on of the occupation, or is it sort of an inward looking sort of plot? Do you refer to what's going on in the outer world in Guernsey?
I do. I try and relate it to what's the situation, what's going on, but not too much, because in fact I had to take some out because it seems too really, I don't want to launch into it being like too informative, because you feel as if you're sort of trying to educate the reader and actually it's just about the story. But yes, I did. I tried to relate what was going on, and I wrote a prologue introducing the world situation before I actually started telling the story.
Yeah. Would it be possible for you to give us a reading from the book that you feel is representational? Yeah, well, please do if that's okay.
Have you any idea whereabouts you'd like me to read?
Anything that you think is representational and sort of will inform the listener as to how the book is structured. Some of the characters.
Yes, let me see.
Right, how about there? Okay.
I'll just launch
looks like heavily annotated.
Yes.
Okay, so this is Theresa reading from an extract from A Sea of Barbed Wire.
Now, this extract follows Lucy as she's on her way to work on her bike at about 6:30 in the morning. Lorries that used to carry supplies like sacks of potatoes and tomatoes passed Lucy, now carrying troops of soldiers, wretched-looking prisoners or ammunition. They also carried tons of cement that they were using to build their fortified bunkers. The ill-fated foreign workers were brought over on ships, transported in disgusting conditions, and herded onto open-top vehicles for transport to their workplace like cattle. The camps where they were being held were filthy, damp, and vermin-infested. They had such poor sanitation, diseases such as dysentery and tuberculosis began to spread rapidly. When such vehicles passed Lucy along the road, she would keep her eyes averted. The hungry stare of the dirt-covered men sitting or standing in the lorries in their pitiful clothes confused and upset her, and again she related such incidents to Franz in the evenings, and he too condemned such treatment. Franz was her German boyfriend. She enjoyed describing to him how the island used to be, when shops were fully stocked with good fresh food and lovely new clothes, and how she was able to go out and enjoy herself and buy nice things. Now she would complain she didn't have much money, and there was nothing pretty to buy. Then he would tuck some notes into her blouse and tell her to treat herself. When Lucy arrived at work, Ellen called to her as she was putting her bicycle away out of sight in the shed. "Have you heard? Dora's husband has been arrested because they found out he's been keeping racing pigeons. They must think he's been sending secret messages. Anyway, he's been taken away and he'll probably be charged." Lucy chuckled. "You've got to laugh, haven't you? I mean, seriously? Pigeons?" Ellen stood watching Lucy take her sandwiches out of her saddlebag, imagining what awful interrogation the harmless man must be going through. Poor Dora. She must be out of her mind with worry. Honestly, they suspect everyone. Do they think we're all criminals? I wish I'd been there. You'll be up there being interrogated too if you're not careful. But it's not right, is it, Lucy? We just allow them to trample all over us. They're ruining our island, picking on innocent people, building those hideous concrete bunkers and throwing their weight around. And eating all our food, said Lucy with a sparkle in her eye. Still, there is a war on. We have to live with it. They're good fun anyway, I think. At least it's not boring having them around. She studied her friend's face. You take life too seriously, Ellie. The war won't last forever, although I wouldn't mind it lasting for a little while longer, she added with a giggle. Ellen looked at her curiously. You can't actually be enjoying the occupation, surely. Why not? It beats the usual washing and ironing, going to bed, getting up, more washing. Oh, it was so boring before. Now I never know what's going to happen next. I think it's quite exciting. You are a nutcase, you really are.
Well, I think you're very brave in bringing out that thought that some people actually may. Early on in the occupation, found it a break in their routine and in some ways sort of enjoyed it. I think come the end, that might have been difficult to maintain.
Yes, it got more and more difficult,
yes.
but some of them did make friends with the Germans. The Germans were ordinary people after all.
Yeah, and I think also the break in routine, I mean, I remember I worked with a chap who rented some greenhouses of a man that lived in the occupation, and he said that was the greatest period in that man's life. It was all he ever spoke about, because the greatest respect, people certainly out in the outer parishes led a peasant type of life, and, all of a sudden this drudgery seemed to brighten up their life. Yep. But of course things turned very, very sour very, very quickly. Yes, so thanks for that reading. And is there going to be a sequel?
Well, now I can reveal that there will be a sequel. A Sea of Barbed Wire does have quite a satisfactory ending, but it leaves you wondering what happens in the future. And so I soon buckled down to writing a sequel, and it's actually going to be published in the new year, probably soon after Christmas in January or February. And it's called Freedom. It's called Freedom on the Morning Tide, and it's about the liberation and what happens to Ellen and Lucy and Lucas.
And so when you were getting towards the end stages of A Sea of Barbed Wire, did you actually know that a sequel was going to come out of this?
I'm afraid I probably did.
Yeah,
because I love the characters so much, and I'd be very reluctant to just leave them there.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. And so I know that when we spoke before we came on, I was surprised that the sequel was going to be available so soon, but this is a very good thing. And I guess you'll be talking about the books at the Guernsey Literary Festival.
Yes, I will. Yes, I've been invited to talk about both books at the Guernsey Literary Festival. Yeah. Yes, and it's I'm on the end of April.
Okay, but the book will be available by February.
Oh, yes, it will. Yes, yes, it will. Yes.
And people locally can just go to the Writers' Block Bookshop in St. Peter Port. But those of you that are listening elsewhere around the globe, as we know you are, you can get it presumably from your good old Amazon.
It's available on Amazon. Yes, it is. Yes. And there's a lot more about it on my website.
Okay, cool. Well, yes, website, please. Let's have the details there. Yeah.
Well, it's at Theresa.com.
www.
Yes, www.theresa.com.
Yeah, well, we'll tweet that out as well. And if people want to get to talk to you about the book, have you got an email address?
I've got an email address on the website. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
so you could be very, very, very pleased to hear from people. Yes.
Yeah, and you may be surprised that people, they do engage with the characters, and the books often have an afterlife where people reflect on the characters, on the plot, and the ability then to talk to the author is available to them. Okay, right. Well, look, that was terrific. Thanks ever so much.
Well, thank you, Keith. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Well, it's the second time we've spoken about the book, and it's always, Nick and I are always very proud to see works of quality representing
It's
Guernsey.
very kind of you to say so.
No,
Thank you.
the book stands on its merits. And it needn't be about the occupation, but this is, and of course this is why this podcast exists. So I'm going to say thank you very much to Theresa. Thank you for coming in. And of course you must come in once the sequel is out there and talk about it, maybe around about the time of the Guernsey Literary Festival.
Yes, I'd love to. Thank you very much,
No,
Keith.
thank you. And we'll just play out with a little bit of Jim Delbridge. So thank you, Theresa.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
He looked to the heavens when he heard the engines hum. A sky full of planes and each one with a bomb. And they're gonna wanna drop them on someone.